The twin suns of the planet Arion fell across the valley in long, warm streaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The wind carried the scent of alien flowers and the faint tang of metal from the distant research stations. It was the kind of day that made even the most ordinary moments feel extraordinary, but for Elias Kane, it was just another day at the edge of the universe and the quiet life he had chosen for himself. Elias's station sat on a plateau overlooking the valley, a small cluster of buildings with sleek curves that reflected the sunlight. To the casual observer, it looked like a modest scientific outpost, dedicated to the study of local flora and geology. In truth, it was a fortress of knowledge, the home of a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the stars. Elias was a living legend. Known in whispers and stories across dozens of star systems, he had solved conflicts without weapons, rescued entire colonies from disaster with nothing but his intellect, and navigated political intrigue with precision and grace. Yet here on this quiet planet, he had chosen solitude. He moved among his equipment, checking sensors and adjusting instruments, his long fingers steady and sure. Every action was deliberate. Every decision was made with care. Years of experience had taught him that even small mistakes could ripple across the universe in unpredictable ways. Still, there was a freedom in this simplicity, a peace in knowing that here, he answered only to himself. The peaceful rhythm of his day, however, was about to be interrupted in a way he could never have anticipated. Across the sky, a ship descended, its sleek hull glinting in the light of the setting suns. It moved with a grace that seemed almost deliberate, like a creature rather than a machine. Elias watched from the observation deck, noting its trajectory, its speed, its design. He had seen many ships in his lifetime, but this one was different. Its design was elegant and purposeful, a blend of beauty and function that suggested both power and pride. The ship landed with a gentle hum that resonated through the valley. Dust rose in slow spirals around it, and a ramp extended to the ground. Elias observed silently as a figure stepped out, a tall, graceful being clad in iridescent armor that shimmered in the fading light. Her movements were confident, almost regal, and her presence seemed to command the air itself. This was no ordinary visitor. This was Zyra, the Princess of Virelia, a star system known for its competitive games of skill and strategy. Zyra had grown bored with the usual challenges. Her people were skilled, and she had defeated countless competitors, yet none had truly tested her. She sought someone extraordinary, someone who could match her wit and skill. And now, her search had led her here. The moment she stepped onto the plateau, her gaze fell upon Elias. There was a spark of recognition in her eyes, not of who he was, but of a challenge. She had heard rumors of humans, of their strange ways and unpredictable genius, and something in her told her that this one was special. Elias descended to meet her, moving with calm precision. He was taller than she expected, with a presence that spoke of quiet confidence. His eyes, sharp and observant, met hers with a steady gaze. "You must be Elias Kane," Zyra said, her voice smooth and confident. "I am Zyra of Virelia. I have come to challenge you." Elias tilted his head slightly, studying her. There was no threat in her tone, only curiosity and excitement. He had faced many challenges in his life, but something about this felt different. "And what kind of challenge?" he asked, his voice calm, measured. "Aims," Zyra replied, a faint smile curling her lips. "Physical, mental, and strategic. I wish to test your abilities." "I expect victory, of course, but I seek the thrill of competition." Elias considered her words carefully. He could have refused. He could have sent her away with a polite excuse, as he had done with many others who sought to test him. But there was something intriguing in her approach, a spark of genuine curiosity and boldness that reminded him of why he had chosen this life in the first place. "Very well," he said at last. "I will accept your challenge." Zyra's smile widened, a mixture of triumph and anticipation. Around them, the small crowd that had gathered began to murmur. The locals had heard stories of the human who lived quietly at the edge of the universe, but none had seen him in action. They watched with a mixture of awe and excitement as the two stood facing each other, the twin suns casting long shadows across the plateau. The first test was simple in concept, but designed to be difficult. An obstacle course that combined agility, speed, and precision. Zyra moved with the grace of a predator, her limbs flowing in perfect harmony as she navigated walls, ramps, and swinging platforms. She expected Elias to struggle, to falter in places where skill alone would not suffice. But Elias moved differently. He was not as fast or as flashy as Zyra, but every movement was calculated, every decision precise. Where she leapt, he calculated trajectory. Where she swung, he anticipated balance. He used the environment to his advantage, finding paths that were less obvious but just as effective. The spectators gasped as he navigated obstacles with a fluidity that seemed effortless, blending intellect with action in a way that was almost poetic. By the end of the course, Zyra had finished first by a narrow margin. But the difference was smaller than she expected. More importantly, she felt a flicker of something she had not experienced before. Respect. Elias had not only kept pace with her, but he had also solved problems she had assumed would be impossible for anyone to solve. The second challenge was mental, a series of complex puzzles and riddles designed to test logic, creativity, and insight. Zyra approached each puzzle with confidence, her mind sharp and agile. She expected to outpace her opponent easily. Elias, however, approached the puzzles differently. He did not rush, nor did he rely on instinct alone. He observed patterns, considered multiple perspectives, and applied principles that seemed almost intuitive. Where Zyra saw obstacles, he saw solutions. Where she saw complexity, he found simplicity. Time after time, he solved puzzles with a quiet elegance that left Zyra momentarily speechless. "You are different," she admitted after the final puzzle was solved. "I did not expect a human to think like this." Elias smiled faintly. Humans have a way of surprising those who underestimate them. Zyra laughed softly, a sound that carried easily across the plateau. "I suppose I have underestimated you. Perhaps this will be more entertaining than I anticipated." The third test combined strategy and improvisation. A simulated scenario projected before them, a colony under threat from a natural disaster, required quick thinking, resource management, and problem-solving under pressure. Zyra quickly organized her approach, relying on her instincts and her training. Elias, on the other hand, observed, calculated, and then acted in ways that no one expected. He used minimal resources to maximum effect, creating solutions that seemed almost magical in their efficiency. The simulation ended, and the results were clear. Elias had succeeded not only in meeting the challenge, but in exceeding it. Zyra's eyes widened, her admiration growing. For the first time, she faced a competitor who was not only equal to her, but, in many ways, beyond her expectations. As the suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of crimson and violet, the two stood together, breathing lightly from the exertion. The valley around them was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind and the distant calls of alien creatures. "You are extraordinary," Zyra said finally, her voice softer now, tinged with genuine respect. "I came seeking sport, expecting victory, but I find myself challenged in ways I did not anticipate." Elias regarded her thoughtfully. "The greatest challenge is not in defeating others, but in understanding them. Perhaps that is why our paths have crossed." Zyra nodded slowly, considering his words. There was wisdom in them, a truth she could not ignore. She had come to test him, but in doing so, she had discovered something unexpected. A human whose mind and abilities were beyond legend. A man who embodied the very spirit of resilience, intelligence, and ingenuity that her people admired from afar. The night deepened, and the stars of Arion began to shimmer against the darkening sky. Elias and Zyra walked together toward the edge of the plateau, not as opponents, but as participants in a dance of discovery and respect. Around them, the small crowd of observers whispered in amazement, knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Zyra turned to Elias, her eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. "I did not come here expecting to find someone like you. Perhaps this is only the beginning." Elias smiled, the hint of a twinkle in his eye. "Perhaps it is. The universe is vast, full of challenges and surprises. I suspect we have much to learn from each other." And so, under the twin moons of Arion, the stage was set. A princess seeking sport had encountered a living legend, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The quiet planet, once a simple outpost at the edge of the galaxy, had become the starting point for a story that would ripple across the stars. A story of human brilliance, unexpected encounters, and the thrill of discovery. As the wind rustled through the alien grasses, Elias and Zyra shared a moment of understanding. They did not yet know the adventures that lay ahead, the puzzles they would solve, or the mysteries they would uncover. But one thing was certain. In this quiet corner of the universe, humanity had made its mark, not through force, but through ingenuity, courage, and the simple, undeniable power of being extraordinary. The night was quiet, but it was alive with possibility, and somewhere in the distance, the hum of Zyra's ship seemed almost like a promise that the games had only just begun, and that the legend of Elias Kane was far from finished. The next morning, the twin suns rose again over the plateau of Arion, spilling light across the valley and igniting the alien flora in brilliant colors. The air was crisp and carried a quiet sense of anticipation. Word of the unusual challenge had spread quickly among the nearby settlements, and soon a small crowd of locals gathered, curious to see how the human would fare against the Princess of Aurelia. Elias emerged from his station, carrying a small satchel of tools and notebooks. Zyra descended from her ship, her armor gleaming faintly in the sunlight. There was no need for words at first. The two regarded each other across the plateau, a mutual understanding passing silently between them. Yesterday had been a test of skill, of agility, and of mind, and the results had surprised them both. Today the games would continue, and both felt the subtle thrill of challenge stirring in their hearts. The first trial of the day was designed by Zyra herself. She had spent the night considering Elias's performance, creating a series of physical and mental obstacles that would push him in ways he had not yet experienced. She was confident in her own abilities, but a small part of her, a part she did not fully acknowledge, wondered how he would respond. The obstacle course was spread across the lower slopes of the plateau, combining natural terrain with artificial challenges. Narrow bridges spanned small chasms, rotating platforms demanded balance, and suspended ropes tested agility. Hidden among the obstacles were puzzles embedded in panels, designed to slow competitors who relied solely on physical skill. Zyra moved first, her body flowing effortlessly from one obstacle to another. She leapt, spun, and balanced with grace, her every motion precise and elegant. She expected Elias to follow more slowly, perhaps struggling with the elements she had designed specifically to challenge him. Elias began his attempt methodically. He did not rush. His eyes scanned the path ahead, noting angles, weight, and timing. He adjusted his movements subtly, leaning where necessary, using momentum instead of brute strength, and solving the small embedded puzzles with careful logic. Where Zyra had relied on instinct and training, Elias relied on observation and creativity. The crowd gasped more than once as he used a simple lever to redirect a swinging platform, clearing a gap that seemed impossible. When he reached the final obstacle, he paused briefly, not out of hesitation, but to consider the most efficient way to complete it. A few seconds later, he landed gracefully on the platform beside Zyra, smiling faintly. Zyra's eyes widened. She had expected to finish first, but Elias had matched her in speed and precision, using clever techniques she had never anticipated. There was no arrogance in his expression, no gloating. only calm confidence. "You are more skilled than I expected," she admitted, her voice carrying across the plateau. "And far more clever." "I underestimated you." Elias inclined his head respectfully. The cleverest solution is often the simplest. It is not always what the eyes can see, but what the mind can imagine. Zyra considered this as she prepared for the next challenge. Today, the second test would focus less on agility and more on strategy. She had prepared a series of games that required anticipation, foresight, and coordination. Situations where decisions had consequences, and where small mistakes could cascade into failure. The first of these games involved navigation through a complex maze, where the layout shifted dynamically based on competitors' choices. Zyra's eyes lit with determination as the maze reconfigured itself, presenting paths that appeared straightforward, but hid subtle traps and dead ends. She moved with confidence, predicting patterns and adjusting her steps accordingly. Elias entered the maze differently. He paused at every junction, observing the mechanisms that shifted walls and doors. He did not rush, but he did not hesitate either. Each choice he made was calculated, informed by careful reasoning. When he encountered a section that seemed impossible, he found an unconventional route, sometimes using the maze's mechanics in ways Zyra had not intended. At one point, Zyra reached a dead end and found herself momentarily blocked by a shifting wall. She realized that the human had anticipated the change and used it to his advantage, bypassing the obstacle entirely. A flicker of surprise passed across her face. Elias's mind was not only quick but inventive, turning challenges into opportunities with subtle brilliance. The maze complete, they moved to the next test: communication and diplomacy. Zyra had prepared a simulation in which they were placed in command of separate colonies, tasked with achieving the same objective without direct contact. They could communicate only through coded signals and indirect negotiation. The exercise was designed to test negotiation, empathy, and ingenuity, skills that often determine the outcome more than strength or speed. Zyra sent her first signal, expecting Elias to follow protocol and respond predictably. Instead, he read her intentions with precision and responded in a way that not only achieved the objective, but also maximized efficiency. Zyra's mind raced to adapt, but Elias remained calm, anticipating potential moves before they occurred. For the first time, Zyra felt the thrill of being challenged intellectually. She had faced countless competitors, but Elias's approach was unlike anything she had encountered. He combined logic with creativity, insight with intuition, and patience with precision. The simulation concluded and the results were clear. Elias had found a solution that exceeded expectations, leaving Zyra both impressed and slightly unsettled. "Your approach is unusual," Zyra said when they emerged from the simulation room. "I have never seen anyone solve problems this way." "It is not just clever. It is remarkable." Elias shrugged modestly. "Experience teaches many lessons. Observation, patience, and imagination often matter more than speed or strength." Zyra studied him for a long moment, the admiration in her eyes now undeniable. "You are unlike any human I have ever met," she admitted. "Perhaps unlike any being I have ever met." The final challenge of the day was a combination of physical skill, strategic thinking, and improvisation. Zyra had designed a scenario in which they would work as partners to achieve a common goal: rescuing simulated civilians trapped by a sudden environmental hazard. The exercise required coordination, quick thinking, and adaptability. Zyra expected to lead, her instincts and training guiding every action. Elias, however, approached the task with calm deliberation. He observed the environment, assessed potential dangers, and proposed solutions that were both efficient and safe. Zyra found herself adjusting to his approach, realizing that working together required trust and respect for his judgment. As the simulation progressed, they moved seamlessly, combining her agility and intuition with his careful planning and resourcefulness. Civilians were rescued, obstacles were overcome, and the scenario concluded with success. The exercise demonstrated not only individual skill, but the power of collaboration, a lesson Zyra had not anticipated learning from someone she had come to challenge. When the simulation ended, Zyra turned to Elias, her expression thoughtful. "I came here expecting a contest, a game of skill and strategy. Instead, I have learned more from you than I expected. You are extraordinary." Elias smiled faintly. "I believe the greatest lessons come from collaboration, not competition. Perhaps that is why we were paired together." Zyra nodded slowly, the realization dawning on her that this human was not just a competitor, but a teacher in his own way. He had shown her that intellect, creativity, and patience could achieve more than strength or skill alone. And more than that, he had done so without arrogance, without seeking recognition, simply because it was the right way to approach the challenge. As the suns began their descent once again, casting long shadows across the valley, Elias and Zyra walked together toward the plateau's edge. The wind carried the scent of alien flora, and the quiet hum of Zyra's ship added a subtle rhythm to the evening. The small crowd of spectators, now familiar with the extraordinary contest unfolding before them, whispered in awe. They had come expecting a game of skill, but what they had witnessed was something far greater: a meeting of minds, a demonstration of human brilliance, and a glimpse of potential that stretched beyond the stars. Zyra broke the silence. "I thought I understood the limits of competition. I thought I knew what it meant to be challenged. But you have shown me something entirely new. Humans, it seems, are not so easily measured." Elias regarded her calmly. "The universe is vast, full of possibilities and surprises. To underestimate anyone, or any species, is a mistake. Every being has potential, waiting to be discovered." For a long moment, they stood together, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition of respect and shared curiosity. Zyra realized that her visit had been more than a test of skill. It had been an opportunity to witness something rare, the brilliance of a human mind applied with patience, insight, and ingenuity. "You are... a legend," she said finally, almost as if speaking the thought aloud made it real. "I have heard stories, of course, but I see now that they did not do you justice." Elias smiled, a hint of humor in his eyes. "Legends are often exaggerated, but the truth is enough. It is enough to inspire and to guide." As night fell and the stars of Arion emerged, the plateau was bathed in soft silver light. Zyra's ship stood nearby, quiet and waiting. But the true spectacle was the human and the alien princess walking side by side, their conversation flowing easily. They spoke of strategy, of puzzles and challenges, and of the strange beauty of the universe they both called home. For Zyra, the day had begun as a test of skill and would end as a revelation. For Elias, it was another day in a life of quiet exploration. Yet he sensed that this encounter marked the beginning of something far larger than a simple contest. There was potential here, potential for understanding, for collaboration, and perhaps even for adventure, beyond anything either of them had imagined. As the cool night wind swept through the valley, Elias and Zyra looked out at the horizon. Somewhere beyond the plateau, new challenges awaited, mysteries unsolved, and wonders undiscovered. But in this moment, there was a sense of balance, of mutual respect, and of possibility. And in that quiet valley under alien stars, the universe seemed just a little smaller, and humanity a little greater than before. The following day dawned with a gentle mist that rolled across the plateau, giving the valley an ethereal, almost dreamlike quality. The twin suns of Arion were muted behind the fog, their light soft and diffused. Elias Kane stepped outside his station, the morning chill brushing against his skin. He had grown accustomed to the quiet of the plateau, to the predictable rhythm of research and observation, but today carried a new sense of anticipation. Zyra would arrive, and the next phase of their competition awaited. When Zyra's ship descended, its hull reflecting the soft light of the foggy morning, Elias could see the determination in her posture. Yesterday had been revealing. Today, he knew she would challenge him not just physically or mentally, but in ways that tested creativity, patience, and adaptability. She had begun to recognize his abilities, and that recognition had shifted her approach from confidence to strategy. Zyra stepped onto the ground, her iridescent armor gleaming even in the soft light. Her expression was serious, yet her eyes held a spark of excitement. She had begun to realize that this human, this seemingly quiet man, was not merely competent. He was extraordinary, and she was eager to see how far his talents truly extended. The first trial of the day was one Zyra had crafted herself, a combination of agility, memory, and improvisation. Large geometric structures were scattered across the plateau, some floating slightly above the ground, others connected by narrow bridges and ladders. At first glance, the challenge seemed simple: navigate the structures quickly and reach a series of nodes in sequence. But hidden among the nodes were complex mechanisms, locks, switches, and symbols that required thought, attention, and insight to manipulate correctly. Zyra moved first, her body a perfect combination of grace and strength. She leapt from platform to platform, her mind calculating each step, anticipating the movement of shifting panels, and aligning symbols with precision. She expected Elias to take longer, perhaps struggling with the unfamiliar mechanisms, but she was confident in her skill. Elias approached differently. He did not rush forward. Instead, he observed, noting the rhythm of the panels, the alignment of the symbols, and the way each mechanism interacted with the others. He did not move faster, but he moved smarter. When he encountered a particularly tricky set of symbols, he paused only long enough to understand the pattern, then manipulated the locks in a sequence that Zyra herself had not considered. The spectators who had gathered at the plateau's edge murmured in astonishment. Elias moved fluidly, almost as if he were dancing with the structures. His movements were deliberate, precise, and efficient, a quiet testament to his intelligence and ingenuity. Zyra reached the final node moments later, slightly ahead in time, but she could not hide the respect in her eyes. This human was no ordinary opponent. He was a master of adaptation and problem-solving. The second challenge of the day tested memory and observation. A series of floating panels displayed intricate patterns and symbols for brief moments before vanishing. The competitors were required to reproduce the sequences accurately, but the complexity increased with each round. Zyra's mind was sharp, trained for these kinds of tests, and she excelled at recognizing patterns and recalling sequences with speed and accuracy. Elias, however, approached the task differently. He observed not only the patterns themselves, but the logic underlying their arrangement. He recognized subtle relationships between colors, shapes, and positions, and used those relationships to anticipate future sequences. While Zyra relied on instinct and experience, Elias relied on insight and reasoning. Round after round, he reproduced the sequences perfectly, often anticipating changes before they occurred. Zyra paused at the final round, astonished. You see things differently," she admitted, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "I have never seen anyone approach memory like this." Elias smiled gently. "Memory is not just about repetition. It is about understanding the structure behind what is seen. Patterns exist to be understood, not just remembered." Her admiration grew, tempered by a flicker of competitiveness. Zyra had never been challenged in this way before, and yet, with every round, she found herself learning from the human. It was a new sensation, unfamiliar and exhilarating. The next challenge was one of strategy and improvisation, designed to simulate complex scenarios requiring both planning and adaptability. Competitors were placed in a simulation of a small colony facing environmental hazards, a sudden flood, shifting terrain, and scarce resources. The task was to manage resources, protect inhabitants, and ensure the colony's survival, all within a limited time frame. Zyra's approach was precise and calculated. She allocated resources efficiently, anticipated hazards, and adjusted strategies as the simulation evolved. Yet Elias approached the same scenario with a perspective that was at once methodical and inventive. He observed the simulation, noted potential consequences of every action, and devised solutions that balanced efficiency with ingenuity. Where Zyra relied on experience, Elias relied on insight. At one point, a simulated landslide threatened the colony's energy supply. Zyra moved quickly to reinforce structures and protect the inhabitants. But Elias saw an alternative. By redirecting water through a simple system of channels, he could prevent the landslide entirely, securing resources without expending extra effort. The solution was elegant, efficient, and unexpected. Zyra paused to watch, recognizing the brilliance of his approach. "I did not anticipate that," she admitted. "You think beyond what is visible. You see possibilities where others see problems." Elias nodded. Every challenge has multiple solutions. Some are obvious, others are subtle. Success comes from recognizing the subtle ones. By the time the simulation concluded, it was clear that Elias had not only succeeded but had done so in a manner that surpassed the expectations of anyone observing. Zyra's respect deepened, though a competitive spark remained. She had faced many competitors, but few had challenged her to learn and adapt as he had. The final challenge of the day was perhaps the most demanding yet: collaboration. A complex problem required them to work together, combining their skills, insights, and creativity. A simulated scenario presented a delicate situation. A research station was stranded on an unstable cliff, and they needed to guide virtual inhabitants to safety without causing panic or harm. Zyra approached the problem instinctively, using her agility and experience to navigate hazards and provide guidance. Elias observed and adapted, anticipating complications and offering solutions that complemented her actions. They moved together, a synchronized team, each respecting the other's strengths. During the exercise, unexpected variables emerged. Sudden tremors shifted the terrain, and a structural collapse threatened part of the path. Zyra reacted quickly, but it was Elias's foresight and creative problem-solving that turned potential disaster into manageable challenge. He suggested a temporary bridge using available materials, timed to coincide with the natural rhythm of the tremors. Zyra followed his guidance, marveling at the simplicity and effectiveness of his plan. As the simulation concluded successfully, Zyra realized something profound. This human, this seemingly ordinary man, was not just skilled or intelligent. He was extraordinary in a way that transcended ordinary measures. His combination of insight, patience, creativity, and humility set him apart, marking him as a figure whose reputation was not just deserved, but understated. "You are remarkable," Zyra said finally, her voice carrying a note of awe. "I have faced the greatest competitors of my people, and yet you surpass them in ways I did not expect." Elias regarded her calmly. "I do what is necessary, and I observe. Understanding is often more important than speed or force. Every challenge has lessons to offer." Zyra paused, reflecting on the truth of his words. She had come to Arion seeking sport, seeking the thrill of competition. Yet she had discovered something greater, a being whose mind and approach could turn any challenge into an opportunity for insight. A human whose brilliance was quiet yet undeniable. The spectators who had watched the day's events from a safe distance whispered among themselves. They had witnessed feats that surpassed ordinary skill. A human whose mind shone brightly in every test. Some of the younger observers looked at Elias with wide eyes, inspired, realizing that intelligence, creativity, and careful observation could achieve feats beyond the limits of strength or training. As the day drew to a close, Elias and Zyra walked together along the edge of the plateau. The mist was beginning to lift, revealing the valley below, the alien flora shimmering in the evening light. There was a quiet sense of accomplishment between them, an unspoken recognition of the progress made. "You have changed the way I see competition," Zyra admitted. "I came here expecting a challenge of skill and strategy. Instead, I have learned from you, and that lesson is more valuable than victory." Elias smiled faintly. "The greatest lessons often come when we expect least. Observation, patience, and understanding can achieve more than speed or strength alone." "That is true in every challenge." Zyra's expression softened. "I underestimated humans," she said, almost to herself. "I thought we would see each other as equals at best. But you are beyond what I imagined. You are a legend, not just in stories, but in truth." Elias inclined his head modestly. "Legends are built from actions, not words, and the universe is full of opportunities for those who seek to observe, learn, and adapt. Perhaps our meeting is one such opportunity." They paused at the plateau's edge, looking out at the horizon where the twin suns were setting. The valley below glowed with an otherworldly light, the wind carrying soft whispers through alien grasses. The day had been a testament not only to skill and intelligence, but to collaboration, respect, and the quiet power of ingenuity. For Zyra, the day had begun as a contest of strength and skill, but had evolved into a revelation. She had come seeking sport, yet she found herself inspired, challenged, and intrigued. For Elias, it was another day in a life of quiet observation, but even he sensed that this encounter would resonate far beyond the plateau, shaping the future in ways that were both subtle and profound. As night fell, the stars of Arion emerged, shimmering against the darkening sky. The plateau was quiet, save for the distant hum of Zyra's ship and the soft rustle of alien flora. In that quiet, both human and princess understood that this was more than a contest. It was the beginning of a journey, one that would test them, teach them, and perhaps change them in ways neither had anticipated. The universe stretched endlessly beyond the plateau, full of challenges, mysteries, and wonders waiting to be discovered. And in that vastness, a human had shown that ingenuity, patience, and insight could illuminate even the most difficult path. Zyra turned to Elias, a smile touching her lips. "Tomorrow, I intend to push you further. I want to see the full extent of your abilities. I want to understand how your mind works, and perhaps I want to learn from it." Elias regarded her with calm eyes. "I am ready for whatever challenges tomorrow may bring. The universe is full of lessons, and we learn best when we face them together." And so, under the soft light of the twin moons rising above Arion, the stage was set for the next phase of their journey. The human and the princess had discovered mutual respect, and the promise of adventure stretched before them, limitless and full of possibility. In the quiet plateau under alien stars, humanity had once again shown its brilliance, not through force, but through thought, creativity, and the steady power of observation. And as Elias and Zyra prepared for the challenges yet to come, the universe seemed just a little smaller, a little brighter, and full of promise for those who dared to explore.